Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Dorsch, Special Projects Coordinator with Habitat for Humanity of Laramie County. And welcome to the Loveland Housing Commission presentation with we will discuss the partnership. They will discuss the partnership that came together to create an incredible affordable housing opportunity for their community. Cindi Hammond has been the Executive Director of Loveland Habitat for Humanity since 2016. Prior to coming to Habitat, she had a 25-year career, which includes nonprofit management, program development, clinical counseling with children and families, university guest lecturing, and community advocacy and engagement. Raised in North Carolina, Cindi has a bachelor's degree in social work from Western Carolina University and a master's degree in social work from Colorado State University. She believes that affordable housing supports an essential component in a person's well-being, while it supports a healthy, balanced, and more vibrant community. Currently, she is the board chair of Aspire 3D, a nonprofit organization associated with Loveland Housing Authority, and serves on the board of directors for the Habitat Colorado and executive task force Habitat for Humanity International. Cindi, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And along with Cindi is Jeff. He has been the executive director of the Loveland Housing Authority since 2018. Jeff began working for the Loveland Housing Authority in 2007. And before becoming executive director, he occupied the positions of special projects manager, housing supervisor, and director of real estate development. During Jeff's tenure at the Housing Authority, he has been involved with or led the creation and preservation of nearly 1,000 affordable housing units, serving 4 communities. Jeff graduated from Colorado State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in industrial technology. And prior to working for the Loveland Housing Authority, had a successful 16-year career with Hewlett-Packard, primarily in manufacturing engineering. Jeff, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you. And with that, we will turn it over to Cindi and Jeff for their presentation on how Loveland, the Housing Authority, Loveland Habitat, and some for-profit partners came together to create affordable housing.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today and allowing us to tell you about this wonderful project that really has defined what collaboration means in a community. It's really brought to the table partners that we didn't know could be involved in affordable housing, but it's really generated a lot of buzz around our community, and we're really happy to share some of the successes and challenges with you. Like you have already heard with Loveland Habitat, having your own habitat here in Cheyenne, you're very familiar with what we do in our communities. But in Loveland, we've been around since 1987. Our habitat completes about 6 homes in a calendar year. We have about 12 homes under construction at any given point in time. And we have always had a really strong partnership with the Loveland Housing Authority. And what we hear in the world of habitat is that is unique. Not all housing authorities and habitats are doing partner projects together. And I think how I would describe it to you is our 2 organizations have really had a unified voice in our community. Because we knew our voices were stronger together to have key conversations around affordable housing. The other thing that we think is unique, and certainly you'll hear about a little bit in this project, is our city is very involved in both of our successes. They are very committed to affordable housing, so much so that a few years ago, Jeff and I were instrumental in getting council to pass 1.25% of our sales tax goes into an affordable housing fund. That fund we both access for our organizations, and that fund offsets our fees in Habitat for every home that we build. So to put that in perspective, right now, that's anywhere between about $26,000 and $30,000 per Habitat home that our city is investing in. So I'll let Jeff tell you a little bit about the Housing Authority, and then we'll get into the slides.
And as you've heard, I'm Jeff, and thank you very much for having me as well. Just a few things that I think are important for context before we get going. A little bit about the Housing Authority. Like all housing authorities, we're mission driven, and What that means to us is really serving that 60% AMI and below households. Although part of our interest in this project is, especially along the Colorado Front Range, maybe the same in Cheyenne, as housing costs have increased almost exponentially, we were getting more encouragement, if you will, from city council and the community at large to do something about home ownership above that 60% range. And as you'll see, that was partly how and why we were motivated to get involved with this project. What's also important to know is that slightly different than at least a lot of housing authorities, we're our own developer. We've got staff in-house that runs the development. I used to do that. Dan mentioned in his intro, best job I ever had, getting to build affordable housing. But also one thing I realized on the way up here that might be important, I really don't know what market rate cost is for a single family home lot in Cheyenne. Right now in Loveland, Fort Collins, the starting point is about $120,000 for a traditional lot, which is, I want to throw that out there because I didn't know when we start talking numbers a little bit later, if you're going to think we're crazy doing all this work just to be able to sell lots to Habitat for $70,000. I don't know what the market is here, but it made sense in Loveland. So a little bit of context there. And so with that, we'll really get going.
So Grace Gardens at Derby Hill. So what is that? And what we want you to know is Grace Community Church is where this all began. And this is one of our partner churches that has worked alongside Habitat for a number of years. They had bought a parcel of land years ago, thinking they were going to build their home church there. But circumstances changed and they wound up renovating an existing building in our town, but they held on to this parcel of land for many years. And so many of those members were instrumental in the vision that you're going to see what we developed. It was their desire to see this parcel used for affordable housing because they had seen what inaffordability was doing in their own church. They were losing members and key positions of folks who held just key essential jobs in their community. So they came to Habitat and said, hey, what if we wanted to give you free land? So, as we're like, free? Of course we want free land, but stay with me. So where we are today is that this parcel of land is going to create 167 affordable housing units. 47 of those lots are going to be Habitat homes, and the remaining are going to be a Loveland Housing Authority affordable rentals, and they will have apartment structures there. So we will serve 30 to 69% of the area median income. As Jeff was telling you, their range, the 30 to 60. Our range at our Habitat begins at 35 and it goes up to 69. And I'm going to tell you why, because that's a very unusual number. You're going to hear more about all of these partners. There is no doubt this project wouldn't exist if every single partner here hadn't made some type of contribution to the project. And we're going to talk a little bit more what that is. Sometimes it was monetary. You'll see in other ways, there were services, but we're going to talk a little bit about that because this screen is actually growing day by day with the number of community investors who want to be a part of the Grace project. But we started with Grace Community Church, like I told you, and then lo and behold, this property had a parcel of land that we needed access to finish out about the backyards of 7 Habitat homes that was owned by another church on a neighboring road that, again, as Habitat, we had a relationship with. And so we rolled up to Derby Hill Baptist Church and said, hey, let us tell you about this really unique project.
And we'd like 50 feet of your property.
And they said, sure. And they also said, we think we could do that basically for free. But in the project, we've agreed to do some improvements to their parking lot for this partnership. But that 50 feet became essential to our success. So obviously there's us, the Housing Authority, the City of Loveland. As you know, you're going to hear more about how are they more invested now. So you heard about our Affordable Housing Fund. Well, it gets bigger because we needed the city to also step up on some of the infrastructure improvements that we were going to have to make in this project. And then lo and behold, underneath here, these are some of our other partners that we're going to talk to you a little bit about. Some are related to Habitat, some are related to the Housing Authority, but we have brought them all collectively together for this particular project. So Grace Community Church, they renovated, and it's right around the corner from this neighborhood is the neighborhood Habitat, our Habitat is currently building in. Lo and behold, and Grace Community Church will tell you this is a God thing. Our existing neighborhood is going to connect to our new neighborhood. Who could have predicted that? But when they came to us, the part that was free are these parcels here. So they wanted to get this land. But in our Habitat, we're not land developers. I don't have deep pocketbooks to be able to afford to do land development. So lucky for me at that time, Jeff happened to be on my board. And I said, hey, what if I could get free land? He's like, free land? So then the conversation opened up, and Jeff and I met with Grace Community Church, and lo and behold, they owned this parcel. And Jeff said, well, what are you gonna do with this parcel? And long and the short is that they allowed the Housing Authority to buy that parcel for a smaller investment, if you will, certainly not market rate on land, to create the project.
Can I jump in?
Jump in.
And so they sold it to us for $300,000. The entire parcel, along the way, we had to have it appraised, was worth somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 million. So definitely without that catalyst at the very beginning, this project wouldn't have worked. But what their original intent was, when Cindi and I asked them, what are you doing with the front lot? The answer was, after you develop the back, we're hoping we can get the original price back out of that front lot of what we paid for the entire parcel, which happened to be, well, actually 275,000, and we gave them a little more for legal fees. So that's how we got there.
So originally, when this concept, it was a concept in the beginning of, okay, how do we do this? How do we put all of our energies together and make something unique? Because we knew we just had an opportunity we hadn't seen, at least in our community. So when we began, our original vision included a local builder that does build some product in our community for 70 to about 120% AMI. Now they build beyond that AMI as well, but they do some of that in our community, and we asked them to be at the table with us. They were key contributors in the beginning. In the end, they are not a part of that project. You'll hear a little bit more about that. But so luckily for our Habitat, that meant that we were going to have the opportunity to purchase more lands, which got us to our 47 more lots, which got us to our 47. Brinkland Development is also a company. It's based in Fort Collins, but it does work up and down the Front Range. And they too were interested in this partnership and had some of their team early on contributing to the project and just informing some of our early decisions that we were making. So originally we thought this could evolve into the picture you see off to the upper corner there. And then we realized, once the engineers got in there and looked more at the slope of the land, we might not be able to get as many structures in there as we originally thought. So we, had the big goal, but what we, you'll hear about is that goal went from conceptual, what did we want the most of, and now we're back to our reality. So we're going to take you to what that looks like.
All right. So the underlying development process for this parcel really wasn't much different in principle than any other dirt development project. What was really unique was the mission we were trying to achieve at the end, and then trying to bring all those partners in to control cost. So the first thing we did, like any project, is work on the site plan, costing, exercises, made sense. And we're going to be honest and tell you where we came up short, where we succeeded. Our original goal, Cindi set for me, was $50,000 per lot.
Had to ask.
And originally we thought, well, we might be able to do that. And so at that point, we went to city council. They were interested in helping us do something, just vaguely, no definition, but help us do something, to create more single family homes. So we went to city council and originally asked for 1.1 million in assistance to hit the cost goals that we had. That's what we thought we needed. They challenged us with that they would contribute half of that if we could somehow fundraise the rest. And so with that, we got serious about the design. And it was at that point that the Housing Authority purchased the land from the church, because it just made sense for us going through the development process, the city's process, to be the owner at that point, just more efficient. From there, it was 4 years of a lot of planning and problem solving. And typically a project like this should have probably taken about 2 years if we didn't have this crazy mission we were trying to achieve. Through that, the Housing Authority played the role as a lead developer. Cindi and her team were at the table with us, helping make key decisions. One of the values to Habitat that we hadn't considered up front is that instead of being in the position of buying lots that somebody else had designed, Cindi was able to weigh in on all of the design decisions and build the suit. And in the end, we were able to squeeze out a few more lots because of that. Aspen Homes was actively involved until, as Cindi said, they chose to exit the project. And at the very end, we're going to talk about lessons learned, but give you a sneak preview. One of the lessons learned is that we, being a nonprofit, just work different than a for-profit, and especially in the movement of money. We have the luxury of time, not always resources, and the for-profit guys have an upside-down model from that. And Aspen Homes needed lots on their timeline, looking at their overall business strategy. We couldn't keep up with them. They found another opportunity. We're still friends. Once they heard we were this far, they actually asked if they could buy lots from us. Too late. But it just didn't work out. Just business. No hard feelings. It just didn't work out. And then Brinkman Development at the time, they're a commercial developer, but they were interested in finding a way to work with the Housing Authority to be a part of affordable housing because they were having their own issues. They eventually left for similar reasons. We just couldn't move fast enough. They have investors that expect a quarterly return, and so they left. But again, still friends. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail on 4 years of challenges, but some of them are definitely noteworthy. The site itself proved challenging. It was 14 acres at the bottom of a hill, Derby Hill, if you're familiar with Loveland. And there was a reason it hadn't been developed, grade and drainage issues. And one of the lessons I learned is free land is not always easy or cheap, but we still made it work. Cost pressures, as you can imagine, over 4 years, every time we were going through another costing exercise, costs were going up. Density and cost goals required 3 different affordable product types. In the end, we ended up just 2, the apartments and Habitat's homes. Management of land issues with 4 different landowners. And by that, I'm not referring to the church property, but the surrounding property. We had to coordinate between the Baptist church, some city-owned land, and then another adjacent landowner that we had to get easements from, and actually purchase a little piece from them as well. And just coordinating all that slowed us down. Incorporation of significant added drainage, which really set us back a full year. And in the name of partnership, we agreed to work with the city and over detain this property. It holds 7 acre-feet of water now, which is a lake in northern Colorado. But it protects further properties downstream, and it made sense. They're going to reimburse us. We took the time to incorporate it. Not to mention we needed the city to be a partner to get where we wanted to. Along the way, city tax revenues decreased, partly because of COVID, and they could no longer commit to the $500,000 they had committed earlier. We did find a workaround with that, though. They contributed to in some non-cash ways, like waiving the requirement to improve an expensive intersection, which they'll work into their budget on another project, deferring some other expenses. So I can't stress enough that the city was still an integral part in making this happen. There were code issues we had to work through, especially on the Habitat side, which they agreed to do. And then, as I hinted at, navigating the nonprofit, the for-profit world, this sometimes got a little complicated. In the end, if there's any developers out there, you'll appreciate all the dark lines here that shouldn't be so close together. Are indicating the grade that we've got there. A lot of retaining walls to combat that. But in the end, this is what we're breaking ground on July 12th, as of this morning. We're going to develop this in 2 phases. The colored part that you're seeing here is the Habitat portion with all the drainage that I just mentioned. And then once we get that done, the Housing Authority will start working on the 120 unit apartments to the east. And then I thought it was important that we just be honest and talk about how we did our actual accomplishments versus the original goals. So up front, we were planning to build 62 single family home lots. We ended up with 47. Cindi said part of that was grade and drainage related, just physical constraints. Part of that was when Aspen Homes was involved, they were building townhomes. So 4 and 6 units at a time. We could get a little bit more density. That product type doesn't work for Habitat. So when they exited the partnership, we had to convert those lots back to single family home. So we lost a few. The multifamily unit count, originally we had the lofty goal of 144 units, ended up 120 for similar reasons. You put it all together and our actual cost ended up just about 20, we're at about 70,000 now. Don't tell Cindi, she owes me a little more money. But about $30,000 over, but as I said up front, that's still about a $50,000 discount. And so I especially struggled with that as that cost increased. And I finally had to rationalize it that maybe I was just too optimistic in the beginning. At least that's what I tell myself. And then on the multifamily side, similar issues. We were targeting $18,000 per door. On our side, it's up to about 22,000. And then the income level served really because Aspen Homes pulled out, instead of hitting that 30 to 120% AMI, we're 30 to 69%. But the successes for Habitat, it's 47 lots instead of 32, which is what they were planning on. So in the end, that's good for them. The traditional operating model can continue for another 8 to 10 years, depending on how fast they build. And I'll just say that's, I'm speaking for Habitat here,
I can jump in.
but I'm speaking as a former board chair. There was a point before this came about that Cindi and I would sit down and look at the land costs and say, what's going to happen when she ran out of lots? And Cindi was having serious conversations about maybe the traditional model wasn't going to work in Loveland anymore, and maybe you have to go to revitalization or something like that. So this really extended that model. And then, as Cindi pointed out, it completes the Sierra Vista neighborhood. For us, the Housing Authority, the successes are we'll also have enough land to build another 120 units. We've got close to 3,000 households on our wait list, so that's significant in meeting that demand. But then it also allowed us a way to meet the commitment to create home ownership opportunities that I had made to City Council, that we would figure out a way to do something. And when I made that commitment, I had no idea what that was going to look like. But this allowed us to do that. And then the budget, I put it up here just in case somebody wanted to dig into the numbers. If nobody's interested, we don't need to talk about it. But I'll start at the bottom. And in short, the total budget was about $7.5 million. And then the columns to the right, we've got the allocation to Loveland Housing Authority. Next column is the allocation to Habitat. I'll just say a lot of discussion how that allocation came about. Sometimes it made sense to do it based on units, most of the time on acreage, depending on if we were talking streets or detention or whatever. But we came to an agreement in the end on what that needed to look like. And then the city of Column gets their own, or City of Loveland gets their own column to account for the $1.5 million in over detention. What's reflected in these numbers, Cindi hinted at it, but all of those names of partners contributed something that lowered these costs. It's hard to pinpoint who exactly contributed $10,000 versus $100,000, but I can tell you that we did an exercise, and if we would have done this at market value, including buying the land at market value, we would have been right at that $120,000 lot price that we're seeing in Loveland. But some significant examples that stand out: Pinkard Construction, which, oh, I'm gonna slide off.
Oh, sorry. Here, go ahead.
Oh, I can't read my own slide deck. Was that really it? Yep. Okay, so in a minute, I'm gonna get back to who contributed what. So everybody good leaving the budget? Okay. So where we're at now, we're actually ahead of this as of this morning. We have received final city plat approval. That's been registered with the county. I'm hours away from completing the stormwater reimbursement agreement with the city. Cindi and I have a contract that's done. And then on Wednesday, we will have a short-term construction loan, which we'll close on. And then July 19th, which changed this morning to July 12th, we'll start construction. And then by January, we'll deliver lots to Habitat. You want to talk about these?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll jump in. So we'll just jump in and give some highlights on who did what, right? To keep that lot cost down. I think the other thing I would share with you that that we got to do as a Habitat, like Jeff was telling you about, we really had to learn more about the development process and figure out how did we come to the table in the whole discussion, because certainly a lot of these partners are very involved in land development, and we historically hadn't been at that table of discussion. So Grace Community Church, as Jeff was telling you, that 14 acres and that it was valued over $1 million. That little parcel of land from Derby Hill Baptist Church actually valued at $50,000. The Housing Authority, because of their commitment to mission and their commitment to working alongside Habitat and the commitment we made to our city to be actively pursuing ways to increase home ownership, are really benefiting, are really giving the project about 850,000. Jump in.
So if I could go back to that strip of land that Cindy just touched on, it really saved the project when the church donated that, because it allowed for the creation of 8 more Habitat lots. There's a little bit of land there, but not enough. It wasn't deep enough. And by adding those 8 more units, we got more density, spread the costs out more. Without that, the cost of Habitat, probably can't do the math in my head, but $10,000 to $15,000 more. It just changed everything.
Definitely. So the city of Loveland, besides the agreement that Jeff was referencing, in fee waivers, once we access all the fee waivers for this particular project, the city will invest an additional 400,000 plus coming out of our affordable housing fund and waiver of fees. The other thing we are going to be able to do as a Habitat is we are going to be building 8 new product types. So for our Habitat, that was pretty big. We had to actually go to the drawing board for the first time in many years to create new products that really fit with our new development code, and certainly I think fit the size of these lots, because currently the neighborhood that Loveland Habitat is building in, we have very spacious lots currently, and we are now moving into lots that are definitely a little size appropriate, I would say. So Pinker Construction, that, you know, the other thing this partnership or this collaboration allowed us to do was to really leverage our partnerships. So this is a long-standing partnership for Loveland Housing Authority. Do you want to give a plug about Pinkert and what they're bringing to the project?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about them. So Pinker's always been a good partner for us. And when this came along, I took one of their principals out to lunch and really challenged them. Hey, here's something that, you know, some really good publicity for you guys, but doing the right thing for Habitat, for Loveland residents. And a day later, they came back and said, well, how about if we do it for 0%? Like, all right, that's a good number. And then 2.5% profit instead of their usual 5%. So really, just a shout out to those guys. They made it happen.
So Ward Construction is a local Loveland family who's been alongside Loveland Habitat for all of the years we've been in existence. They do all of our dirt work and excavating. And hey, Tim, any chance you're building somewhere else in town and you've got dirt to get rid of? And lo and behold, instead of charging us for that dirt, he brought about $50,000 worth of dirt to that site. We do have more dirt to bring in, but still every dollar counted, and that was huge. So just a really involved local family that is committed to affordable housing. Brinkman Development that Jeff talked about, you know, their contributions in the beginning stages, those added up. Again, saving the project. Galloway Engineering also discounting their services for us. And then on the backside for our organization, we didn't have a relationship with Galloway. And what it turned into is they turned into a major donor for our particular habitat. And certainly they're key in this project. So BHA Design is our land planner, and they've waived fees. Good Samaritan, they're the project Jeff mentioned we had to get. It was the smallest parcel of land, but that Good Sam community is expanding, and they had a little triangle portion of land we had to obtain from them. Aspen Homes in the beginning, as you've heard about, A&B Bank is their financing partner. I think the only partner not mentioned there for Habitat. So we were prepared, as you heard, to buy 32 lots. We were not prepared to buy 47 lots. So all of our strategy to afford the 32, it was rock solid. But I have had to go out for financing on the difference of the money that we had raised or invested because we needed more money. So we're still working with some local partners, one of those being the Habitat, our state organization, who's also working with Colorado Housing and Finance on some money for us. And then we have an organization called Community Impact Development Fund, who also is involved in affordable housing in our region. And they're looking at our financing needs, not very big financing needs, but enough that we wouldn't do a traditional bank financing situation for our particular habitat. So Jeff and I are going to wrap it up and tell you a little bit about our lessons learned in 4 years of getting this off the ground.
Want me to go?
Yep.
Okay. So I already said it, free land is not easy or cheap. Civil engineers begging us to buy that land for the next one. But in the end, we obviously still made the project work, and it was better than any other option we had. We couldn't even come close buying another parcel that maybe would have worked better. But in the end, because of the slope, we ended up with about $1 million in retaining walls to navigate the slope. Part of that's detention related. But even incurring that cost with all the other benefits, this project just made sense to keep going. We also learned that a commitment to the mission is absolutely necessary for a Grace Gardens type project to be successful. And really, there probably wasn't a day that went by that we didn't have to revisit that mission and either pump up a partner or look at each other and say, is this still making sense? The costs are going the wrong way. And it just, that commitment. And even the commitment from the partners that left. They left for good reasons. They added value. Not probably enough said about that. And even with donated land, it's very difficult to meet cost goals in the current environment. And truthfully, if we were pulling building permits even 2-3 months from now, we'd be seeing significant cost increases for all of the piping and concrete. Probably what we're hearing is 10 to 15%. So it's going to be an ongoing battle. Another lesson is for-profit and nonprofit. I hinted at this. Operating models are different, not necessarily good or evil or bad or good, just different, different goals. When we're mission driven, sometimes we just make different choices than a for-profit. The Uniform Development Code does not always meet the needs of affordable developers. I think every municipality is finding this out. And in 100% good faith, just prior to this project, the city of Loveland had spent a year updating and reviewing their code to accommodate affordable housing. And not just for us, but for for-profit developers. They did a good job. And this project was one of the first times that was actually applied, and we still had to go back and ask for waivers just to make it work. And then last one is continuous education of partners and community is required. I know you all know that. You just have to keep people aware of the need. Before this started, we were talking about data, and being a reformed engineer, I can't agree more. Just our wait list statistics, the data that Habitat's got, even with all this investment, it's just a dent in the need out there. Whew, so how we do on time? So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah.
So were any of the units in the development, are they all single family or are they going to be twin homes?
Ours are all going to be single family.
If you wouldn't mind just repeating her question.
Oh, sure.
Oh.
That's okay.
So the question was, are any of the Habitat units designed to be like twin homes or multi-unit? And our particular products that we're going to be building are all single family for us. Yeah, and it's around HOA requirements, and when we go to whether it's pair a home or do a quadplex or a duplex, the complexities around the structure of that sub HOA and the financial constraints that it puts on our Habitat, it makes some of our units that we have in a sub HOA, literally we have homeowners pay about $200 a month towards their principal. And these units just really are not cost effective for our particular habitat to create. I know other habitats are doing that in a variety of ways, but that's where we landed for this particular project.
You mentioned that there's a 1.5% sales tax, and you guys were involved in that, but did that happen before this or during the middle, or, and can you talk a little bit more about
Sure.
that?
Sure.
So it was just coincidence, but that, oh, sorry.
Repeat the question.
I do not follow instructions very well. So the question was around the affordable housing fund that the city of Loveland created, which is 1.25% of the total tax revenue collected. And was that created for this project? And the answer is no, but coincidentally, it was created about the time that we were starting. And part of the reason for that is no different than today, but it was about that time that city council really started to pay attention to affordable housing and trying to figure out what can we do. And they approached Cindi and I, and this was one of the solutions.
Can you say how much money is going to come from that again? Or estimated?
Sure. And so the question is, how much does that fund amount to annually? And of course, it depends on tax revenue, but it's been between $400,000 and $500,000 a year. And what we use, between 400 and 500,000. And what we use it for, both of us, is to cover fee waivers that the city approves. We go to the Affordable Housing Commission of the city, ask for affordable designation. Once that's granted, then we can go to city council and ask for the fee waiver. And that's usually how it's funded.
So, thank you for answering. I had a question about that. How much pushback did you get in trying to allocate the percentage of this tax to affordable housing? How long did it take to get through?
So the question was, how long did it take to get city council to approve that fund? And it was relatively short, just a matter of months. And a couple of reasons in my mind, Cindi might have some input too. One is just city council at that time was very motivated to do something about about affordable housing and do something for all developers, not just us, even though they gave us priority. But by having that fund, that also eliminated a problem for them. Until that fund was there, when we would go ask for those fee waivers, they would have to consider, where's this funding coming from? Are we going to take it from transportation? Are we going to take it from the general fund? And so by having this fund available, it helped them out by already having that money earmarked and allocated. And frankly, it helped us out because as we're planning future developments, we say, okay, there's $300,000 left in that fund. We'll go ask for this project this year, or maybe we'll wait and try to work with the city on that.
I feel like we're at good timing right now.
I know we got a bill on your press.
And
Go ahead.
both organizations obviously are all about partnerships. That's the only way affordable housing is going to get addressed. And in that light, I'm speaking for Cindi here, but I know she would agree. Both Cindi and I would be more than happy to come address your city council and just talk about how this worked, how it's benefited us. We might be able to even get a counselor to come with us.
I bet we could. Even whether it's current counselor, former counselors, I bet we could. Because obviously it was other people too, like folks in this room, who really were the catalyst on just being cheerleaders on our team and understanding what protecting affordable housing really meant to the community. Because I think the other thing we had to do, and it kind of ties to part of your question, Kate, about the amount of pushback that we got, is I think this particular project has elevated our conversation and our community, because we do have such a wide variety of partners who've come to the table and who have lent their voice to affordable housing, whether it's one of those companies you saw on the screen who have to bring workers to work in our community, and they want their staff to be able to afford to live there. So we really have, it's really allowed us to come together and to say, this is what our community has done and why government played a role, why mission partners played a role, why for-profit partners play a role, while our school district plays a role. I mean, we really just have reached out and pulled in different folks in our community to the conversation, so it doesn't get lost, because we all know what's happening in all of our housing markets, all up and down the Front Range, and probably here too, right?
You know, another benefit that happened that may or may not come to fruition is there's been a couple of articles in the newspaper about this as we've progressed. And there's another church in town that just happens to have 45 vacant acres. And they read that story and reached out and said, hey, we want to do this too. And so they can't donate it. They're in a little bit different financial position, but another opportunity in the making there that we're certainly pursuing. Maybe keep Habitat in business beyond 10 years.
Right. And so again, it's just a way that we open the conversation differently. So I think we just have been very appreciative of just that platform it's given us, and it's certainly resonating. And so we're getting a little more, we're getting some national press on this too. So we're really thankful for that, and hopes if there's anything that we can share with you all, we're more than happy to do it. We were talking about that when we arrived. It's nice to be able to share and not reinvent the wheel if we can do it.
I have Marcy. I haven't looked at the price of lots. I'd say the last, maybe the last 4 months. Last year, I remember average lot 70, 90,000. Currently, what does it look like? You know, what lots?
Yeah.
That's such
Just a
good
typical
point.
single family home lot.
So the new development, from my understanding, that's going on south of LCCC called Sweetwater, the lots in there, I had a realtor tell me that they were selling for $90,000.
Yeah. Well, and then I called up those lots, that was a good year ago, and that was the price then. They were very small, so they're just, the lots are available. You'd be surprised, because look at all the land production.
Right. Well, it's got to be developed. Right.
You can find some for 50, some, but they're usually more rural, further out. But yeah, in town lots, 90,000 starting.
With all that.
Okay.
Big ranches, right?
Yeah, so.
This is crazy.
We just came from a lunch where a year ago, January, we purchased a lot in a very older part of town, and we purchased it for about $44,500. And I mean, that's reasonable, actually.
Wow.
Wow. So would you?
Yeah. And the last time our Habitat bought lots, it was right after the housing bust, and they were able to buy lots out of bankruptcy at $20,000. So going to my board to say I had to do a whole lot of education. You know, I had some realtors or folks connected to development on the board, but the rest of the board, we had to do a lot of education around this is what lot prices have done, and this is what the reality looks like for our Habitat. So this project was key in helping us get a more affordable lot to continue the mission. Yes.
Did you reach out to your realtor association or your home builders association for partnerships? Because then you have folks down there.
So the question was, did we reach out to our realtor associations or those partnerships to be a part of this? I would say we're at that phase now. So we are having conversations in our community about grace with some of those key partnerships, and we're talking to them because some of our, like our realtor association also does some grant funding around our community. So as soon as we got those contract signs that we mentioned in the presentation, which some of that, as you heard, happened today as we were driving up, then we knew it was time to open the door. So we've done that in a way of, we've attended lots of Realtor Association lunches to talk about the project over the course of those 4 years. But now we're going to change our tune a little bit because the project is real. The project is going live. So this is now how those groups can be instrumental. And so we do think the conversation is going to evolve.
And I'll add to that from the Housing Authority perspective. We've never actually completed a project with the involvement of the Realtor Association, but we've definitely in the last 4 or 5 years been at the same meetings talking about how do we tackle this, how do we address this. And one of the things I learned coming from the Housing Authority world, we talk in terms of area median income, and that's what defines affordability. A realtor has to define it different than that. Those 30, 60% AMI means nothing, but their affordability to a realtor is there a home out there that my buyer can afford to buy? That's affordable. And so kind of meshing those two worlds. Actually, when Aspen Homes was still involved, we had some really interesting dialogue about that very thing. And the conclusion I came to is there isn't one correct definition of affordability. It depends on the context.
The reason I ask is I know that I work for the local Realtor Association and the Home Builders Association. And I know there's funding from the National Association of Realtors for housing affordability. So I encourage you, or anybody in this room, if you're working on a project, to reach out to those associations to see if there's some.
Yeah.
And also for members of your board, I know realtors and builders would both love to serve on boards, so they bring that expertise.
That's great.
Yep.
Great.
And the last part, we both have that, but I don't want to repeat your first question because I don't know who's out there and we want access to that money first. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. Yep.
You have time for one more?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Just a couple more.
Yeah, no, we're good for a little bit.
So Jeff, you mentioned most housing authorities aren't developers. How does a usual offer come about that the Loveland Housing Authority is a developer?
So that's really, so the question was, because a lot of housing authorities are not real estate developers, how did the Loveland Housing Authority become one? And it's really a history lesson unique to us. So I'm only the second executive director that's been there in our 50-year history. Sam Betters was there first, spent his entire career there. I think he graduated from kindergarten, went to the Housing Authority. And Sam is just very mission-minded, number one, but also very opportunistic and entrepreneurial. And that's really the culture that he created. And I will say the first probably 20 years of our existence, we didn't do much development. And what we did was traditional HUD projects, which are cumbersome and I would argue antiquated programs at this point. And when the tax credit program came about, the Reagan administration actually invented that to encourage private investment into affordable housing. And when that happened, it allowed us to really operate very much like a for-profit developer with a mission, where we got to control our own cash flow, leverage our own assets. And so it was a slow process over time as we built up. Today, we've got almost $100 million in assets, and we leverage those like any other developer. We earn developer fees. The difference is we reinvest them. This particular project, we chose not to make much. We covered our expenses. If you think back to that line item budget, we've got about $225,000 in there for a developer fee over 4 years. That didn't really cover our staff time. But most of the time we get paid for that and we just reinvest it. Long answer, sorry. And
I think this is an easy question, but would you be willing to share some of the codes that were still troublesome even after after you had revisited the city code for affordable housing?
So the question was, would we be willing to share the troublesome code, city code, building code? And yes, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we can get more specific. I'll just give you kind of a glimpse of what some of those things are. So in the world of habitat, it's not uncommon for us to build two, or at least at our habitat, build two product types next door to each other that are the same product type. There'll be a different color. There might be, you know, different stonework on the front. The porch might have a different feel, those types of things. But part of how we control our costs is having a very limited number of product. The new code, the neighborhood we're in right now, we have about 5 product types. They required us to create more product types. They didn't want to see us do 2 product types next door to each other. They didn't even want them across the street from each other. So that became very challenging. They had some specifics around garage setbacks, around the style of windows we use. I mean, we really got into details where we had to sit down with the planning department to say, the way we do the habitat thing is we've got to really control that cost. And we don't have the luxury of having 5 different styles of windows and 10 different styles of doors and 50 variations of paint colors. So those were some examples, but certainly we can get a little more granular if you'd like to know a little bit more about that.
And if we get those from you, we can put them up on the AHA Cheyenne website. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll end it there and just say thank you to Jeff and Cindi for being here today. We
Well,
really
thank you so
appreciate
much
your
for
time.
having us.
Really appreciate it.
So now that it's over, we're going to come clean and admit this is the first time we've given